TogiNet Radio has partnered with one of the largest travel booking engines in the world to offer savings of 15 to 30% or even more. I give you the opportunity to go look at their hotel fees and take advantage of their cost savings. Please go to www.bestradiotravel.com. Check them out. I think you'll be pleased.
Welcome to Second Wind with Joyce Buford, a program for and about women. Joyce Buford is a certified coach and motivational speaker who has a passion for helping women who need a second wind. She is the author of the Amazon bestseller, Effortless Happiness, How to Find Your Voice and Finally Ask for What You Really Want. She studied directly with her mentor, Jack Canfield, and is a fully certified coach in his program. Also, she has served as an assistant in his training programs. Through her study with many prestigious coaches and mentors, she has created a powerful program that has positively impacted thousands of people. On today's program, Joyce and her guests will help you to get your second wind. Now here's your host, Joyce Buford.
Welcome. It's always such a treat to have you here. I love that you've stopped by this morning to listen to the podcast because I always have just the most interesting guests, and I hope that's why you're here to listen to us. Before I go on, I want to share with you, go on with my guest, I want to share with you an offer that I have on my website that is about happiness. And so if you will go, if you're needing a little more happiness in your life, you want to experience what might be missing from your daily lives, I've given you a tool. It's a free offer that you can go and download at my website. If you go to JoyceBufordEmpowers.com, then you'll see the free gift there that's listed. It's 5 steps to finding happiness. So in this time of trial, stress, and frustration, many of us do get off course, and we sometimes forget our happiness really is in our control. So these are 5 steps that can help you regain your happiness. I hope you'll go there and claim this. It's waiting for you. So moving on into our show today, I am so pleased to have Jillian Wheeler as our guest today. Let me tell you about her. She graduated summa cum laude from St. Edward's University with a degree in community and mental health. And she is trained as a counselor at the Texas Institute of Family Psychiatry in Houston, Texas. She claims herself as a writer, speaker, and consultant for more than 3 decades, with a background in consulting, writing, and marketing. She has roots in 2 countries. Her mom, as she kindly says, her mom, M-U-M, was Canadian and dad a Texan. And she grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia, up and down the West Coast and in Texas. She lives with her husband now in the beautiful hill country of Texas and has 3 grown children and 3 grown nieces whom they have helped raise, and 10 grandchildren. They love to travel. Oh, I immediately connected with her. Another traveler, another soul traveler there. And she's an avid reader and walker, and the happiest near the ocean. Well, Jillian, is it the waves that you like about the ocean? What is it? That power that we see here. Welcome.
It's an interesting thing. I used to work with a man who grew up in Cuba, and he was living in the middle of the country at the time, in the middle of the United States, and he was saying that his theory is that people who grow up on the ocean are never happy far away from it. And I think that may be the case with me, having grown up in Vancouver, where the ocean is everywhere. There are rivers tumbling down into the ocean and mountains looking down on the ocean. There's hardly a place you can stand in the city that you don't see water.
Yeah.
So it's where I feel most at home. Although, you know, as you said, I love to travel, and there's so many beautiful places on this earth to see.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. And I have to say some of them are in Texas. You know, we have to have that Texas pride here going on since we're both from Texas. But I am so excited because of your program called Reboot Your Bliss, which also talks about the process that you actually created as you went through handling your own depression throughout the years as we grow up. I share the process. You share your process with your clients, and it's called Reboot Your Bliss, which is a 3-month personalized mentoring program. And then you also have your book. So tell us about this depression that you lived through and developed this process around. Just what happened in your life.
Well, I think I've been clinically depressed at least since I was 5 years old. I grew up in a very abusive home. I was the oldest child, and my mother was an alcoholic, and my dad came home from World War II with PTSD and was extremely violent. Oh. And, you know, they certainly, as all parents do, they did the best they could at the time, but it was a terrifying environment in which to grow up.
Yeah.
And I realized myself as I married young. I was 20 when I got married. I was 18 when I got married, 20 when I had my first child.
Oh, my goodness.
So while I was trying to sort out my own mental health, I was also trying to make a marriage work and trying to raise 2 kids. And I had an episode, a suicidal episode, early in my marriage, a few years into my marriage. And I went into the hospital and started doing therapy and began to realize that the more I learned about healing myself, the more I wanted to work in that field. So I went ahead and completed my education and became a counselor myself. And of course, I think there's something in the universe that is always true, which is we teach what we're learning ourselves.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So I helped many clients as I began to develop techniques to help myself. I shared them with my clients. And I've worked with probably thousands of people who've been clinically depressed. And I have a program, course for people to self-help in healing their own depressions. I'm certainly not opposed to a medical model of depression. I think there are times that conventional medicine has a lot to offer. But I think ultimately, for those of us who face chronic depression over the years, we need to have a toolkit that we put together that enables us to make it through life without falling into that pit. And that certainly was the case for me. I've been through many things in my life. I think most of us, I mean, folks listening here, I know you certainly, when we shared the other day, most people go through a lot of difficult things in life. Life is amazing and wonderful and exciting, but it also brings challenges.
Yeah.
And getting through those challenges without becoming immobilized by depression has been the greatest gift for me. And the fact that I've been able to help other people do that, and I've been able to do it myself, is one of the real satisfactions of my life.
Right. Well, I kind of question, and yet I know it's probably just a figment of my imagination, but We like to say that we go through more heartache, more depressing moments these days. And certainly we see it by these shootings that take place all over the United States periodically and killing so many people just innocently going up, living their life and taking their life in a day. But do you think we really are increasing in our depression, or have we always had a depression? Because certainly back in the old days, it was difficult. We had difficult things that happened to us, like unplanned deaths and all of that. But do you see an increase or decrease, or do you get a reading on that?
That's a really interesting question. Let me just say, I don't know if you're aware of this statistic, but 1 in 4 women between 35 and 50 is on psychoactive medication. And almost always that's antidepressants. And 1 in 8 men. So certainly we're talking about depression more.
Yes.
But
yes.
And of course, it's an insecure world, and there's this huge political divide in our country that's so painful because so often it's within families. I have friends and family members that I know feel very differently than I do, and we have to find a way to work through that. And also, there are a lot of worldwide realities, wars and tragedies, and certainly I think because we're Texans, we've really been affected by these 2 shootings in a row in El Paso. It's difficult to cope with so much. Everything is so available to us now. We know what's going on, whereas before mass communication, we didn't know in the same way.
Yeah.
But I know that my mother in the 50s had several what were called at the time nervous breakdowns. And I think what she experienced was just a severe depressive episode. She had that 2 or 3 times when I was growing up. But as I look back to earlier times, and I can only imagine, but I think that, first of all, people were so busy making a living and taking care of big families that they really didn't have the luxury of stopping to notice the difficulties they were having emotionally. And people, certainly women, didn't have the options that we have now. But there were always people who suffered emotional breakdowns. And I think while there were fewer decisions to make in life, it also means that a lot of people lived in situations that they really weren't happy with. So it's an interesting question. I don't know if there's a definitive answer.
Well, you brought up 2 things that I do definitely think adds to today's stress. One, the media. We hear about everything happening all over the world, so we get a lot more input into conditions, threatening conditions that happen. So we get that a lot sooner. And then also just the accessibility of medication is so much easier, and sometimes prescribed is so much easier. I know when I went through my divorce, I was, couldn't stop crying. I was definitely stressed, and it was really no problem. Once I just said, I'm just crying, I can't stop crying. He said, okay, let me write this for you. And it was an antidepressant, and I did stay on it for maybe 3 years, way past the divorce. But I did say, I want off this. And I think there are many women that don't say that as they continue living their lives. So I think those are 2 very important things that you brought to mind there that we do have in our present day that we didn't have back in the old days. We just didn't have the flooding of all of the horror that goes on around the world. It just wasn't as accessible. So I think it does add to our life.
And I think also something that's important to note. One of the things I do in my course in depression is that I go through the history of the medications and, the medications and their various side effects. But I will share that when I was first realized that I was severely depressed in the 70s, in the early 70s, that the medications that were available were extremely limited and not very useful at all.
Oh.
But now that we know so much more about how the brain works, the medications are greatly improved. And as I mentioned before, I'm certainly a believer in using medication when you're at a point, as you were, when it's just hard to be functional. If you're feeling that you might want to end your life, I think if you're just having a hard time taking care of your children and doing your job, then I think medication can be an interim solution. And for some people, I need to say, for some people who have manic depressive illness, people who are bipolar, a lot of those folks really need to be on medication for the rest of their lives because they have a very challenging mental health profile. And in order to find that happy medium, sometimes they need some chemical assistance.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious to know, how does one know when they're severely depressed? Are there signs that are in all depression?
Yes, there are. And one of the things that people might be interested in doing, I have a website called Help for Depression Book and helpfordepressionbook.com. And on that site, or you could just put in my name and you'll find it. On that site, I actually have some tests that people can administer to themselves to decide if they're depressed.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful. But in general, I would say people are often depressed if they find that they're very tired, if they feel that they just don't have energy to make it through the day, if they feel that they have frequent bouts of crying, if they're sleeping much more or sleeping much less, if they're moving slowly. Depression has many physical manifestations as well as emotional. So if you're doing things slowly, if you're feeling hopeless, if you're having trouble concentrating, one of the ways that I always know if I start having an onset of depression, and I will say it's been many years since I've had a serious, ongoing, active bout of depression, but I still, times will come that I will realize that I'm beginning to get depressed, or often my husband will realize, and one of my children will realize and say, listen, you need to notice what's happening here. And one sign for me is that I have a lot of difficulty processing mentally. I can't do math. I have trouble doing tasks that require concentration. Some people just feel really agitated and have a hard time relaxing. And then appetite is another thing. Sometimes people are, just eat compulsively or just lose all their appetite.
Yeah. Yeah. I think but aren't there more people that have those moments than don't? I mean, I almost consider some of those down days as just part of life.
And I think that's true. We're always experiencing things in life that we have to respond to. And I think a serious depression, a real depression, isn't diagnosed until it's been present for several weeks. If people have been feeling depressed for more than 2 weeks and it feels as though they can't get control of it,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a time to pay attention and realize
Right.
you may need some help. When you know
Right.
when you're in the middle of an emotional process, often you just don't realize what's happening, and you
Right.
have to stop and do a check-in or have
Mm-hmm.
someone else check in with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, depression is a word that I never really quite used with me until I had that experience with the divorce. And then I didn't understand why I couldn't stop crying. But the medication certainly did help. So it was an important thing for me. And I just went to my GP or I guess it was a gynecologist, and he prescribed that. So the doctor that you would go to is either your family doctor or a GP, right?
That's a perfectly good place to start.
Yeah.
And what you were experiencing, I'm sure, was a lot of the depression that comes with grief, because
Yes. Yeah.
having a marriage end, whether you make the choice or your partner does,
Mm-hmm.
is just a devastating grief process.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how angry you are or how ready you are to leave,
Mm-hmm.
people feel greater and lesser degrees of grief. But
Mm-hmm.
even if you get a new job and you're excited about your new job, but you're still walking away from the job you had before and the friends you made there,
Mm-hmm.
life is full of change, and grief and loss is part of accommodating ourselves to the change.
I'm
And
so
the other
good.
thing is,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say the other thing is depression. One type of depression is situational depression. And that means a depression that's brought on by something that occurs in our lives. It's not indicative of a real permanent condition. It's just
Mm-hmm.
simply how we're feeling as we respond to something that really sucks in our life.
Yes. I think I've had those. I
Yes,
know that
I think
one.
we all
I know
have.
that one. Well, that was the most enlightening thing several years back, on this journey that we're on. I shared this, and one woman shared it with me, that anytime you have change in your life, you go through grief. And it never dawned on me. And you're saying it again, just reiterated it to me. And I want to make a point to share it with the audience that did you realize that every time you go through change, you experience some level of grief? It may not be the worst grief. It may be a lighter case of grief, but you do have the processes, the 5 steps of grief that you do go through. And so I was just amazed because I hadn't really equated it with anything but actual loss, like death. And I always feel now that a loss of a marriage is a death of a marriage. And so we grieve naturally, when we go through the divorce process. So it was
think
really eye-opening for me when I learned that. So I'm glad you
Yeah. I think also it's useful, and for our listeners, I think it's really important to know that, because that way we're not questioning ourselves. Why am I feeling sad? I should be excited about this change. Why am I having such a hard time with it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a classic example of that is moving. If we move from one town to another, that's an enormous change. And there's usually a lot of grief, even though we may be consciously very excited about the changes. Moving from one house to another, something that I love to travel, but I'm also kind of a nester, so I really like having my home the way I want it to be. And it happens that I've moved quite a lot in my life, and I've developed a ritual of going through each room and taking photographs before I empty it out.
Uh-huh.
And then it's one of my little coping mechanisms. And I think human beings are just endlessly resourceful. And I think we all find coping mechanisms
Yes.
for what we're doing.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I like that idea. I have been known to move a lot, and they sometimes joke about it that I move, tease me. But yes, I've definitely felt that. It's like I have to walk through and say goodbye to the old house, even though I'm excited about the new house. It really is a change, an adjustment. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, because you mentioned my Reboot Your Bliss 3-month personalized mentoring program.
Yes.
And that is not necessarily related to depression. That's a program in which I work with clients one-on-one in a very intensive way for 90 days. Mm-hmm. And certainly mental health is one of the issues that sometimes brings people into the program, people who are feeling depressed, or people with anxiety, or people who are bipolar. Mm-hmm. But people come in for a lot of other reasons too, and divorce is one of the reasons, certainly, or when someone is trying to make that decision.
Yes.
When someone is on the precipice of a life-changing decision but hasn't been able to process it through yet. Mm-hmm. Or when people have a difficult situation at work and don't know how to navigate that. And because I have a background in marketing as well, often a lot of entrepreneurs come to me for mentoring, and or aspiring entrepreneurs, people who either they're finding themselves working so hard they're just like on a little hamster wheel, exhausting themselves and not really accomplishing anything, or they want very much to work for themselves. And so I can help people with that, because I've written a number of books, and one of my books was called Your Internet Cash Machine, which I read with my friend Joe Vitale. And so that I know a lot about marketing. But also people come to me when they're working through grief and loss. I know in my own life I've been through a fair amount of grief and trauma. And the other thing often is people come when they're dealing with physical illness. Either they're sick themselves or they're taking care of someone who's ill.
Oh, that's difficult. Yeah.
It is. It can be just exhausting. Mm-hmm. And I know, through my life, as I've dealt with and put depression behind me, I faced other challenges. My husband had advanced cancer, and we spent most of a year at Cancer Treatment Centers of America. He is now in remission and doing very well. But he has had a couple of heart attacks from which he's recovered. Oh. I had an early breast cancer, which was, when you get a diagnosis like that, it certainly gets your attention.
It does.
And we've been very, very fortunate that we've returned to health, but it's frightening. Mm-hmm. And it also stops your life. It also brings everything to a screeching halt. It's that old saw about if you want God to laugh, just make plans.
Yes.
And earlier this year, over New Year's weekend this year, you mentioned we have 10 grandchildren. We have 9 grandchildren and 1 in heaven now. Our 23-year-old granddaughter was murdered. She was abducted and murdered. And that. So I have a very strong sense of how to get through enormously difficult life challenges. And I'm fairly open about these things because I feel that in my work, I'm called upon to bring in my own experiences to be able to support other people. Different people will process differently than I do. But one of the things I give people in my mentoring program and in all my programs is the toolkit I was talking about. I really believe that therapeutic tools, but also law of attraction tools. I think there are lots of tools people can use to get through difficult times.
Well, I'm going to break here. And when we come back from this break, I'd like to go into talking about your Reboot Your Bliss and the toolkit that you have for transitions of grief and sorrow. So if that's okay with you, that's what we'll plan to do when we come back. So come back and we'll hear more from Jillian.
Transformational coach, motivational speaker, and author Joyce Buford returns after this short break.
TogiNet Radio has partnered with one of the largest travel booking engines in the world to offer savings of 15 to 30% or more on hotel booking fees through our own web portal, www.bestradiotravel.com. Discover the discount you can receive by going to bestradiotravel.com/Joyce, Joyce, to see for yourself. This is a custom booking site for the listeners of my show through TogiNet Radio. We have negotiated special rates at over 650,000 hotels worldwide to save our customers money. Our members leverage our massive buying power to save thousands of dollars by booking with us. BestRadioTravel.com can beat the best prices offered by any other major travel booking website. Please go to bestradiotravel.com/Joyce, sign up, and enjoy the discounts. This is bestradiotravel.com/Joyce, Joyce.
Welcome back to this segment of Second Wind. Joyce Buford, the author of Effortless Happiness, continues in this segment to share insights that will help you live a life of greater purpose and filled with happiness. Now here's our host, author and coach, Joyce Buford.
To Second Wind. And we are visiting today with Jillian Wheeler, who has created an awesome program called Reboot Your Bliss, which is a process that she has created for her clients to help them manage sadness and grief that they may have experienced in their life. So, Jillian, would you kind of lead us into how this process was created and how you've been able to benefit your clients?
Yes, I'd love to do that. Well, first of all, it's my belief that all of us come into life with a huge capacity for bliss, for happiness. Mm-hmm. I've been very fortunate. I've worked a lot in the birth community, and my daughter is a doula. She works a lot with newborn babies, and so I've been fortunate to be present at a lot of births. And one of the things that I've always noticed is that when this new little person in the room, everybody in the room has an immediate sense of who he or she is. It's just a stunning experience. And what I see in all those babies is joy and happiness. And as they begin to giggle and respond to being loved, and see, for babies who are fortunate enough to feel safe in their environment, there is just so much bliss. And I believe that's what we all deserve. And I decided that what I wanted to work on, the lens through which I wanted to work, was helping my clients regain that state of bliss. And I strongly believe, from my own experience and from working with people, and from all the people who shared with me over the years, that it is quite possible to go through something terribly painful and to still, even in the midst of that, experience joy. And that doesn't mean we're ignoring our feelings. It doesn't mean we're in denial. I always think of the Leonard Cohen song when he says, the cracks are where the light comes in.
I like that.
It's just an amazingly accurate description, I think. None of us gets through life intact. We all have cracks and wounds that we've suffered. But if we're open, then the light comes in through that. And I myself am spiritual. I believe in a higher power. But I think whether the people I work with do or not really doesn't matter. Just being open to the idea, love is available all around us. There is love available in the institution. Clients, when I think about a toolkit, first of all, I bring my own therapeutic tools because I have a lot of training in different modalities of therapy. And although the work I'm doing now is not therapy, and I'm not a medical professional, I work now as a mentor, but I bring a lot of those tools to a relationship that I have with a client. And then I'm a big believer in a holistic approach to life and to problems, because I believe that we all are mind, body, and spirit. And so often we have to learn a different way to talk to ourselves, a different way to process mentally to have a different outcome. Right. If you see somebody having a bad day and they're talking about, I don't know why I did that, I made this huge mistake, and they're beating themselves up, that creates a specific climate in the brain, a specific production of brain chemicals that cause stress, that actually change the structure of the brain. And so if instead people learn to talk to themselves and talk to each other from a position of love and self-acceptance, then we have a completely different outcome in our mental health. And I believe also in the physical part of it, certainly in depression, there are actual physical aspects that can be addressed. There are supplements that can be used that are, in most cases, as effective as psychoactive drugs. There are foods to eat and not to eat. Exercising is important. There's a whole physical component to our mental health and our happiness. And then also there's a spiritual component. And that's where I've written a lot over the years about law of attraction and studied a lot of law of attraction since I was in my 20s, which is many decades ago. And, I strongly believe that while we can't control everything that happens in life, and I believe that some things come in and that's just what we're meant to struggle with and grow through. I also know from my own experience that we can create a lot of our own reality. Right. And so that's one of the things that I teach people to do. I also use something called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a particular type of therapy that people can do for themselves, that involves deciding on certain behaviors and then tracking those behaviors. If, for example, I have someone who's verging on depression, and I make a suggestion that they be more active, that perhaps they try walking 15 minutes a day as one thing to begin, then I have charts for that I can share with people where they can track their own progress. Yes. And so there are many tools in my toolkit. They're not everything isn't right for every person.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really like doing is working with individuals who come to me and they're going through something, and they may not quite have a grip on what it is or why it's so painful. But my job is to be their cheerleader, their supporter, to be a mirror and help them see exactly what's happening, and to make a decision for how they'd like their life to be different in 90 days. Because we can make a lot of changes for the better in our lives in 3 months. You know, you may not, if you're longing for a relationship, you may not find Mr. Right in 90 days and be married by the time the program's over, but you'll have a lot of tools to help you achieve what you want.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes we totally overlook the power that we have and the control we have over ourselves, over our bodies, over our mind. And your program sounds like it really addresses that so that a person having completed it or going through it the light would come on and they'd say, oh, I can change this. Even though it might have been something that they took in very early in their life, they can still change it. I think is exciting to know about your program, that it has that power to give them their control back. Yeah.
You know, one of the things I really like about your website and the work you do is that you talk about empowerment, because I agree with that absolutely. I think it's so important for us to be able to be conscious about the power that we do have.
Right. Even I think some people become victims and live their life for a time. We hope they recover from that victim mode mentality. But if they've been in situations where they lose their power, I think it's so empowering to let them know they can regain it. They don't have to stay as a victim. In that situation, they were a victim, but they don't have to, going forward, have to stay there. And I love that about just knowing that, passing it on.
I love that too. I love working with clients who are figuring out, getting in touch with their own power, because each of us has so much power. And, you know, I work a lot with clients about boundaries. And so many people, men as well as women, but particularly women, we don't know how to make good boundaries and enforce good boundaries. And boundaries are something we're all training each other in all the time. You know, we're always teaching other people what we'll accept and what we won't.
Right.
And I think good boundaries really are a tool for people to be able to regain their power.
Right.
Or maybe for the first time in their lives to feel their power.
Right. Well, you know, I came from a family that never argued. Now try and do that. You know, naturally I took it into my marriage. And so I didn't know how to have a adult conversation or to even call up something that really wasn't working for me. So, you know, those are some things that we carry, and they go right into our own marriages, and then they don't work so well there either. But that was always something for me. And certainly if I were to create a new relationship, I'd have to come see you, Jillian, because I'm not sure I've mastered that area.
Well, my guess is that you've learned so much that you're probably some man is going to be very lucky when he meets you. You know, I think too we have cultural things. Like in your case, you're talking about your family culture. In my case, I grew up a lot in Vancouver, which is very British. My grandfather was very British, and So there was a lot of not showing emotion
Oh.
and not hugging people, which was anathema to me as a person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I learned those behaviors, but I never felt that I really fit into my family because it's just who I am. You know, I'm always going to hug people unless they're sending off vibes saying, don't touch me. And
Right.
I'm always going to, you know, talk about what's going on with me and be open. And it's taken me a lot of years to really realize who I am, what's authentic to me.
Mm-hmm.
So family culture is important. I think social culture, all of those things play a part in how we behave. But ultimately, we need to learn, if we're going to be happy, we have to learn to trust ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's an exercise I just came to mind when you were saying that. In studying and working with Jack Canfield, you know, I started out in his Success to Business program that he has. And one of the exercises was to stand in front of a person and look them in the eye. And he would, you know, we would stand there from 3 to 5 minutes. And we don't do that very often. You know, we may glance at somebody's eyes, but we don't stand there and look in those eyes. And it was so life-changing because eventually, as the exercise went on, it got longer and longer, you know, you'd go into your emotion. I mean, I'd start crying just simply out of the connection that I had made with that person. And, you know, we were doing it with men because there were men and women in this class, in this workshop. And it was just so powerful. Who would have thought something so simple would have been so powerful? Have you ever experienced that?
I have. I was a foster parent for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done it in workshops, but I remember specifically doing it in a foster parent training.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a man that I was paired with, and I think his wife and my husband were paired. And he was not a very, you know, he was kind of a good old boy person, very nice, very warm, but not much of a talker about emotions. But
Yes.
as we stood and just looked into each other's eyes for several minutes, there is an intimacy that we run away from a lot in our culture. You know, we made a connection that at the end we just, you know, hugged and held each other for a few minutes. And even though, you know, I never saw him again, I have that sense of I made a connection with that human being. And I often think of him and send a little prayer his way and hope that life is going well for him, because it's the kind of connection that it's just outside of our cultural norm. And I think even with lovers and parents and children, often we don't spend enough time just allowing ourselves to stop talking and experience that level of intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember when my babies were born, and I particularly remember when my youngest son was born, I had this experience with him. I was in the hospital with him for several days, and he just looked into my eyes all the time. It's like he was just soaking in, not just bonding with me, which was certainly there, but he was also just soaking in information, you know, just, and that's who we are at our core.
Right.
We are those innocent, beautiful people at our core. And a lot of what we learn in life just covers it up and makes it inaccessible to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing how powerful such a simple exercise could be. I would like for you have some wonderful offers that my listeners can take advantage of. Would you like to talk about those and also tell them how they can get in touch with you if they might be interested in knowing more about your work and certainly your books that are on your website?
Oh, thank you. And we were talking the other day about I was a co-author in a Jack Canfield book too, and they
yeah.
changed the title at some point, but it's Life Lessons in Mastering the Law of Attraction. I went back and looked just so I could tell you.
So good.
Yes, I have a website, which is JillianColemanWheeler.com. And from there, you can get to the Depression website. But you can also download an ebook, a free ebook called 7 Steps to Reboot Your Bliss. And I think that's something that everybody who downloads it loves it. And I get notes all the time from people. And then I'm happy to talk to anyone personally about my Reboot Your Bliss 3-month personalized mentoring program, which is kind of my signature program. And it's not for everyone, but it is, I do make available like a 20 or 30 minute call where we can get to know each other and then decide if that program is right for someone or what other program I have that might be right. And people can access that by going to, and I'll send you this link to put on your website, https schedulewithjillian.as.me, schedulewithjillian.as.me.
Oh, okay.
And also I have a Facebook page, Jillian Coleman Wheeler, that has lots of information on it for anyone who's on Facebook.
Yeah. This now your 3-month program, is that a one-on-one program or is that a group program?
Oh no, that's a one-on-one program.
One-on-one.
And it's a very quite a time-intensive program. It's definitely a commitment of time and energy, and to some degree a commitment of money. But it is the way it works is that I will talk with a client once a week for 12 weeks, and we'll have an hour together I use Zoom so that we can actually see each other and talk as though we were in the same room. And then every week I'll send tools and information to the client, and they have unlimited access to me through email. I'm always there to return an email if they ask questions.
Right.
And when the time is right, we'll decide, and I'll be the support person and help the client decide what exactly they want, how they want their lives to be different in 90 days. And of course, many clients work with me a lot longer, but that is my most intense program, and it allows people to go as deep as they want to go. And I talk about it on my website. And then I also, of course, have the program that you mentioned, which is at rebootbliss.com. And it is my video, it's multimedia, it's video and audio and ebooks, a program on overcoming depression.
Yeah.
And I have other programs. So there's, depending on how intensively you want to work or how much you just like to get a taste for how I work, there are lots of options for folks. Yeah.
Well, I could tell just by our visiting this day. I mean, who wouldn't want to work with you, Jillian? You're so warm and
so sweet
and sensitive. I mean, I think it'd be a treat to work with you, and certainly the growth would be there for a change of life or increasing one's life value. I mean, that's awesome. I just think you'd be an awesome person to work with. So. But do you ever?
Thank you. And it's a great joy for me.
Yeah. Do you ever come back to Texas? It sounds like you're traveling a lot.
We actually go to Texas every 3 months or so and spend a couple of weeks because our children and our grandchildren live there, except for one of our children lives in Pennsylvania. So we don't get to spend as much time with them, but for example, I went back at the end of July and I spent a week in Austin and a week in Houston. I was able to have one-on-one time with each one of my grandkids and each one of my children. So that's we're a close family, and family is a lot of what sustains me. So we make that a point, and that works out well for us. And then then we go off and do things we like to do. We spend a lot of time in New Mexico.
Yes. Well, I love that you have incorporated your love of travel and your professional life so that it works. I think I really think that is walking your talk there, that you're able to do both things. And it just says, we all can do that. If that's our dream, that's what we can do. And we
just live in amazing times in terms of the options we have around work.
Yes.
And I love helping people figure out how to access those options.
Yeah. I agree. We're very fortunate time. Now, what is next on your schedule? Are you planning another book or another course or just another trip?
My book is coming out before the end of the year, and it's Reboot Your Bliss: Help for Depression, and it is a book that is going to be published, and we're very excited about that. I'm really looking forward to getting that done. I have done some work this year assisting a good friend of mine in getting his book published. We have old friends. Their names are Tom and Diane Pauley, and they have a site called richdreams.com. And Tom had a series of strokes and some near-death experiences that his book is amazing. So I've always been published almost always by New York publishers, by Wiley usually. And so this will be my first foray into self-publishing, and I'm excited about it. Many of the people that I know who are writers have begun to self-publish, and the trend is certainly going that way.
Yeah. That's another great thing about our time, that we do have that flexibility for more people to be published and more words to get out there, more good information. So I'm liking that about 21st century as well. Well, I want to say, Jillian, this has been such a treat for me. I love your work. I love talking with you and sharing your message with my listeners. So I thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, it was so kind of you to invite me, and it's been a real pleasure for me to talk to you. And I look forward to getting to know you better.
Yes, I think so. We may cross again in this future that we are living, all this good stuff. But I thank you, and dear listeners out there, I thank you for being here. I hope you're as excited about Jillian Wheeler as I have been and just getting to know her. And I am excited that I've been able to share this with you on Second Wind. Now, next week that we'll be back with another show, another great guest. And I'm hoping that this week will be one of peace and joy for you. It's all out there. Just go to Jillian's website, download her ebook, and you can begin recovering and knowing, rebooting your bliss. So take advantage of the great offers that are here available for you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate and love each of you out there. See you next week.
Joyce Buford returns next week at the same time for another edition of Second Wind. Through the Joyce Buford Empowerment System, women are receiving the support they need through their transitions and are able to reclaim their true purpose with confidence. They receive the tools they need to map out new lives. You can find out more about her coaching services at joycebufordempowers.com.